go. So I guess the first thing to say is that the session will be recorded. Yeah. And there are still some people joining us, so we'll just maybe give it another 30 seconds. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to What's Next for Gerontology, Priorities for Research, Policy and Practice. So this is the third and final session of the Centre for Ageing and Biographical Studies 30th Anniversary Conference, which is jointly hosted. This session is jointly hosted by CABS and ERA, which is the Emerging Researchers in Ageing Network within the British Society of Gerontology. So for those who are joining us who are new to CABS, a bit of background. CABS was established at the Open University in 1995, and at that time, ageing research was still an emerging discipline. And from the outset, CABS has championed interdisciplinary work and co-production with participants. Its research has influenced practice and policy in areas such as tackling loneliness, supporting mental health resilience, promoting age and dementia-friendly communities, and recognising the role of migrant groups in shaping geriatric care. It's also worth noting that CABS has also led efforts to make the OU itself more age-friendly as both an educator and an employer. And CABS continues to shape ageing research and practice, and we aim to produce some sort of proceeding from this 30th anniversary conference. So watch this space. So as I mentioned, this is the third of 3 sessions of this conference. On Wednesday, session 1 explored how ageing research policy and practice have evolved since CABS was founded in 1995. The keynote was delivered by Professor Sheila Peace, Emeritus Professor of Social Gerontology at the Open University and a founding member of CABS. And Sheila reflected on how gerontological research has shaped society, emphasizing the importance of a life course and biographical perspective. We also heard in that session how the way we speak about aging, the way we care for older people and perceptions of aging have changed, while recognizing that much remains to be done. And then on Thursday in session 2, current trends and challenges in gerontology were examined. There, the keynote was delivered by Professor Barbara Barbosa Neves, an award-winning sociologist and Horizon Fellow at the Sydney Centre for Healthy Societies. Barbara highlighted the risks of socio-technical ageism and called for co-designed, empowering approaches to technology in later life. While challenges are clear, there was also much optimism. For example, technology's potential to enhance later life, the remarkable achievement of global population aging in and of itself, and new narratives of aging as living rather than decline, older people as positive change makers, and the value of inclusive conversations about aging today. So together, these sessions have shown both how far we've come in those 30 years and the challenges that remain as we look ahead. So as mentioned, this session is a kind of coming together of CABS and the British Society of Gerontology through the agency of ERA. And it's a privilege and pleasure to co-host this session with my colleague Amy, who is the serving ERA chair. So over to you, Amy.
Thanks, Sam. So welcome everybody. Not a huge amount to add to what Sam's already said, but in terms of ERA, if you're not a member, please do look us up and consider joining. As part of ERA, we run a few in-person events. We also run some online talk. So we have Gerontology and Tonic, which we aim to do several times throughout the year, which will have people at different stages of their career coming to speak about perhaps a topic that they research or something that they're particularly interested in. We actually have an event on the 30th of October, so I would urge you to have a look at that. Yeah, and in terms of our connection, obviously we're part of the BSG and we run the pre-conference event. And in that, we invite people to come and present their work. So we offer a range of different formats for that, not just the traditional 15-minute oral presentation. We also have sessions such as the Petra Kucha, we have poster presentations, and we've also started doing the 3-minute thesis style presentations. So so today's session will run as follows. So we'll have a keynote address. We then have a panel of speakers, and then we'll have a question and answer sessions with all of you. So, make a few notes maybe for the questions that you'd like to ask our lovely keynote and our panelists. So I think we're ready, are we, to start with our keynote? Is that right?
Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing this slide at my end, and then if the keynote speaker could share their slides when I do that, that'd be great.
Okay, so it's my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Dolores Valpuesta, a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Sherbrooke and at the Department of Developmental and Educational Psychology at the University of Seville. I think Dolores is an amazing speaker, and I've had the pleasure to see her recent presentation at the BSG at the University of Surrey. So I'm so glad that she could join us and do this for us. So over to you, Dolores.
Hello, everyone. It's okay, the sound? Yes, perfect. So thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation to CAP and Eras, Amy and Sam. I'm in Canada right now, so it's my morning. So good morning here, good afternoon for you. I come from the Research Center of Aging in Université de Sherbrooke in Quebec, Canada. And also I'm part of the University of Seville in Spain. So I would like to ask you patient with my accent because I have a mix of French, English, and Spanish in my brain, so it's not easy. So if I say any word that is not correct, we can speak about that later. So when I received the proposition of do the keynotes of this activity, and I saw the title, I was thinking like, oh my God, there are many things that I can speak about priority and in research, practice, and policy. But for me, it was easier to think about, okay, me like a early career researcher, what are the question that I do to myself? What is the problem that I found in my daily activities in the research of gerontology? And doing this question was easier for me. So today I would like, in the 15 minutes that I have, I would like to point the 3 aspects that I consider are important. The first one is the challenge regarding the intersectional perspective in gerontology. The second one, I know that is something that we usually speak about that, but I think is not enough, the spaces that we insist in this point. The second aspect is the creative research method to promote agency between the participant in research in gerontology. And the third one is questioning the ageism in the research that we do in our field. So I think everybody in this cell know that if we have the intersectional lens, we are recognizing that the combination of various forms of oppression leads an exponential discrimination. So conditions like the religion, gender identity, hobbies, mental health, are interconnected, and a person may experience several forms of discrimination at the same time, like racism, sexism, homophobia, or transphobia. So currently, we are in Quebec, in our center, in our research center, we are doing a research about the social participation of older adults, LGBTE plus with disability. So With our experience in this research, what we are reaffirming something that everybody knows that is important of placing the intersectional perspective at the center. And also we can confirm that these older adults LGBTI+ remain largely invisible in service, policies, and research on aging. There are two ideas of our research that I think that we can transfer to any research in gerontology. The first idea is like all identity categories are fluid and claimed by the individual as well as imposed across time and context. And the other idea is that in case, for instance, of the exploring the intersection between aging and gender and sexuality was our first intention. But in the road, we found that, okay, but there are many other conditions like disability or ethnicity that we are not considered, that are there, that have some interactions. But that's suppose a challenge when you have a limit of budget, when you have some objective like defined at the beginning. And I think one of the challenge of the gerontology is like take this challenge also and don't be scary to change our objective or method or etc. So better understand the processes of exclusion is in a changing society context. Suppose that we should analyze the interaction between different things, between individual, interpersonal, social, and structural resources and barrier. And I will focus in this concept of structural. We do some question to ourselves in our team, like is how privilege and oppression shape aging of population in vulnerable situation. And here I found the comment that one participant in Spain do in a discussion group about social participation of baby boomer generation. And he said, I think there is less criticism of the system. As an individual, this is very serious danger because we allow ourselves to be pushed and around. Me, like I'm psychology, so I usually focus the research in gerontology in the individual, interpersonal, and social aspect. But what about the structural one? I think is one of the focus. I know that there are many people doing research about that, but I think from my experience, it's something that we should include in the way, I don't know how you say, transversal in all the research and practice in gerontology is the reflection about the structural resource and barrier. So Dolores, why is important this perspective? Well, this intersectional perspective captured the complex aging realities, is a challenge also the normative model of positive aging, successful aging, and inform more inclusive policies and intervention, but also improve culturally sensitivity care. The second aspect that I want to propose today was about what about the creative research method and how to promote this kind of method for the agency of participants. When I speak about agency, I speak about the capacity to intentionally influence their own functioning through proactive actions. So for me, creative research method means iterative process. It means like we promote cycle planning, building, testing, and retesting our project. So it's like a methodological fluidity in continuous adaptation. So when we analyze the type of research method that we propose, it's important that we think about, okay, are we capturing the complexity of the experience? And are we giving voice to inaccessible personal stories? Not only from the discrimination or oppression, also to a strategy of resistance and adaptation. So the agency responsibility in research, I think, should be perceived as something collective, interdisciplinary, cross-gender, intergenerational, and intercultural process. So the key research step for us is analyzing and evaluating how we construct the knowledge. So research methods are connected to how individuals come to navigate in their social context. And it's important to do the reflection about collaborative methodology as a liberatory praxis. So the combination of method could offer like an innovative way to explore the reality, but I think we should consider seriously, as a researcher, we should promote safe and accessible space for participants. Sometimes our ambitions of being innovative and creative is not, we are not taking care of this aspect. And also promoting methods that facilitate opportunity to better establish connection between time, place, and space. We have some experience here in Quebec with Photo Voice and Go Alone interview. And analyzing this experience, we arrived to the conclusion that to think about creative method, we should consider accessibility and adaptability in diverse contexts. Also, given the power to decide what to show, what to talk about. And if we want to increase the feeling of involvement and the motivation to participate, we should give voice in the process. Is the most important thing that we saw in our experience. And also do something fun for people, less pressure, something new, and promote the conversation more fluid and less directive. I don't know how is my timing. I hope it's okay. I think it's okay. I don't know, I'm so fast, and in my accent is not it's not a good idea. So the third aspect that I want to point today is questioning the ages research. Something that we have in common in this cell is that we are within the society. So we are influenced by negative societal expectation of other adults. And we conduct research and interact with a cultural context where ages is around the world. And we are not immune from being ageist just because we are working in this field. So if we start from this reflection, I do different question related to that. Because I work in the exploration of social participation of other adults, there are something, and I promote a method that promotes the participation, especially. The first question is how to identify pseudo participation in research. So participation aimed at the ratification of decisions that already made by the external bodies. External bodies could be the funders, could be your supervisor, whatever. And there are mechanisms to cultivate an impression of openness, but carefully retain decision makers. So I propose that we should think about a genuine, I don't know if the pronunciation is correct, participation. That means cooperation, referring to partnership, a delegation of power, and community members' control, and meaning empowerment. So maybe no, I'm pretty sure in the context, in British context, you have a long experience in this kind of participatory research. But I think in another context, we should improve and rethink about that. And that supposes a challenging power dynamic that sometimes we are not in position to face. The other question that I do related to the ageist research is how the voice of older adults are incorporated in the definition of the problem or research objective. So topics that we choose to include and way we approach, they can promote ages. So the social construction of aging is influenced by imposed beliefs and views of those in power. So co-research help to improve that, or be sure that this topic under investigation matters locally. There are a limited number of studies that include older adults in all the phase, like the definition of research aim, development of the study, aspire outcome, and it's not easy. is time. But we should think about the scientific rigor, and that question for me is part of this scientific rigor. The other question is related, are we projecting optimistic, dramatic image of older adults based on social desirability? For instance, we are doing research about mental health in later life, and we are focusing on depression and suicide. Or even in my experience in different projects that we did about baby boomer and sexual diversity, we use sentence like older LGBTQI plus adults have serious difficulty to participate in the community. And we finish with this sentence, or a silver tsunami. But we go to the opposite side also. All baby boomer are a generation with better health conditions. What is the limit? So the idealization is combating the ages. A very optimistic perspective could generate or promote more frustration. And the catastrophic language means like it's more relevant and necessary research object. The last question that I do today for this related to this ages research is, do our choice in research, like how, who, where, respond to requests of scientific production? I think this is the big question for the majority of early career researchers. Well, we can say that having a critical reflection about the role of researcher is important. Important means to advance knowledge about co-researcher with other adults. Gaining attention of audience of funders through catastrophic framing is not the road. So scientific production over meaningful research is a big risk. We should respect the timing, but we are assuming that the timing is slower. And if it's not this word is difficult, publication, I don't know how to pronounce, is not value. If we cannot publish, it's not value. What we are doing with all the results that are not published. And the other thing that is we are researcher as a human. So what about the personal impact that this daily task and this interaction with human have in ourselves? This is me trying to answer this question, trying to manage this in my daily. So I would like to finish my presentation. Thank you, saying thank you for your attention, but also saying like, don't give up. The idea of the presentation today is not giving answer about the challenge and how to answer the challenge. I think the challenge is taking the time to do this question, to give the space for the reflexibility about what is a challenge and how to face this challenge. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dolores, for such a thought-provoking keynote. It's always such a pleasure to hear you speak and speak about the work that you do. So we'll now move to our panel, and I'll introduce each speaker individually as they begin. And I would ask our presenters to keep to 5 minutes, and I will tell you when you have 1 minute left. So just keep thinking about your questions that you want to ask Dolores and our keynote, and our panelists once we get to the Q&A. So our first member of the panel who's going to speak is Maya Chu, and she is a postgraduate researcher in sociology at the University of Surrey. So whenever you're ready, Maya, to share your screen.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you so much to Sam as well for having me here. Try not to eat into my 5 minutes here. My name is Maya Chu, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my current project and how it leads into answering, or at least ask some of the questions of what's really next for research policy and practice. So my work is on the study of aging older trans women in Malaysia, and I will look into the aspect of timing, health precarity, legislative infrastructure, and care, and part of what I'm going to talk about next. And it overlaps a lot with actually what Dolores spoke about earlier in terms of intersectionality and perspectives, and also the cultural and as well as the reflexivity of as a researcher. So, oops. So just in a summary, Malaysia is a middle-income Southeast Asian country with majority Muslim population. where its policies and politics are heavily shaped by conservative Islam. And I explore my work through the framework of Halberstam and Golston, where we look into nonlinear life scripts throughout the life course, and of course grounded in the perspective of culture that's specific to that geographical location and historical time as well. And I use creative qualitative method called River of Life, where they map the life course visually, and it's followed by a semi-structured interview where they elaborate more on what they drew. And some of the key findings so far, I look beyond the Anglophone world where politics are shaped so differently. And in my study, for example, looking at trans population, an older cohort of trans women in Malaysia who transitioned during the brief 3-year period of the 1970s and 80s meant they had legal documentation and care funded by the state. And this was in a way more advanced than many Western nations at that time. And it was um, in a way in a really positive outcome. But the later cohorts faced more moral policing, exclusion, as well as criminalization legislatively. So the unit here isn't age, it is cohort timing. And then secondly, with decades of self-managed feminizing hormones plus poverty, some of the another intersectionality as well, it contribute to later life comorbidities, things like cardiovascular issues and some of the other comorbidities that come with use of hormone. And of course, care runs through chosen kin and NGOs, non-governmental organizations, rather than NATO family. And many of them plan small, dignified futures. They're very much present-oriented and not very retirement-centric. So that's a different lens to look at later life aging for older trans women. And we need to consider for research, like how minority populations are an area that's really not well understood. And Dolores mentioned earlier the LGBTQIA two-spirited plus. I mean, we do have a lot of different population that requires a bit more attention. And the main emphasis, I would say, is being cohort aware, given like the differences in social historical experiences of different population. And of course, for me, I feel culture is significantly it's in its importance. I think it should be considered in gerontology. For example, when we talk about the notion of filial piety, where which is and just summarily, like I'm not doing this very well and explaining it. It's in a short time. Filial piety, respect for older people, very common in East Asian cultures. That's also reflected in some other cultures. I think those are important when it comes to like policy and research as well. And even as well in the UK context, because there's so many different cultures as well here. And the use of creative and visual participative methods can provide different and richer routes to learning from those with especially challenging and traumatic experiences. There are some things that you can't use that the participants won't be able to verbalize them. So giving them a different medium or method to express themselves, I think that's an important consideration. And how do people do it on which population? That's really highly dependent on what you're researching, who you're researching with. And in terms of practice, at least for the trans population, we look into thinking of the idea of clinicians and how we work with them. And we generally, at least in this conversation I had with different gerontologists and health professionals, and in a European context, though, that we need to fix some of the small administrative harms that block access to essential later life health, things like screening, access to variation of hormones or cessation where necessary. And of course, guidelines and legislation should be made to accommodate end-of-life wishes of LGBTQ plus people, because there are so many experiences where they are generally excluded from, especially when it comes to partners at the end of life where they're not considered family to an extent for some people. Now, just really briefly, lastly, when we talk about politics, it is so time dependent, and it really depends on where you are and geographically, historically. Just to think about what's happening recently in the UK with the Supreme Court definition of sex as biological sex, a very essentialist sort of perspective that's been detrimental to a lot of trans people in the UK. And this trickles down to older people as well in terms of how they access healthcare later on. So these are some of the things that we've seen in Malaysia previously. And this is very much something that's really dynamic and it could happen anytime. So the state has the obligation to ensure protection of its citizens based on its constitution. But the problem is it shifts so much from time to time, and we never know how that's going to happen or when it will happen. And the other thing to consider is also how standardized or respectful documentation could exist for, at least for my purpose, for trans people. And this encompasses things like ID, chosen kin, and legal matters. I'm just going to end here. I hope I'm doing it within a good time. This is how we make gerontology a bit more inclusive and more just to have a bit more consideration for different intersectional perspectives, really, because there isn't really a homogeneous or generalization that we can make for any particular group, really, and depending on where you are in the world, in time as well, and which cohort you are part of. And I should end here.
That's great. Thank you, Maya. Much appreciated. Very interesting, and I'm sure that it will generate some questions for you in our Q&A session. Right, so I'm going to move to our next speaker on the panel, which is Dr. Rebecca Baxter, who is Associate Professor in the Department of Nursing at Umeå University. I don't know if you're able to see the chat about timings, Rebecca, but I'll see if the hand raise function works for you when you've got 1 minute left. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, I can't see the chat clearly, but I've got a timer going myself.
Okay, cool.
Perfect.
All right, well, take it away.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Amy, and thank you for having me. I'm also aware of time and how little there is to talk about such a huge topic. I've decided to narrow it a little bit into one of my passion projects, which is, gerontology in nursing homes. My research focuses broadly on person-centered and health-promoting gerontological care, palliative care, and critical care. But as I said, for the purpose of today, just looking at nursing homes and specifically the concepts of living well and dying well. And my background is I'm a New Zealander, Australian, but I'm living in Sweden. So that's the perspective that I'm coming from. But just very briefly, a bit of what we know. We know that resident needs and demographics are changing, and that the population of people that are living in nursing homes doesn't look the way that it did even 10 years ago. The average time that a resident lives in a nursing home in Sweden is around 6 to 9 months. In Europe, it's closer to 2 years. So we know that palliative needs exist for the people that are living in nursing homes. And even though people are moving into residential care when they're older, when they're more frail and they're more unwell, we know that positive experiences also exist and that residents can thrive when they're given options, choices, and a sense of autonomy. And oftentimes, while moving into a nursing home can be viewed from the outside as a time of loss, it can be for residents that it's also a time of empowerment where they're able to have the support and tools that they need to continue to live well. And in saying that, residents themselves often don't fear death or dying, talking about death or dying. But interestingly, it's healthcare professionals who don't dare to ask the questions. So these foundational pieces of research can be thought of as, I guess, building blocks for the research that's needed to support residents in the future. And if I'm looking only at living well, the research that we've conducted in Sweden and Australia focuses on well-being, this idea of place-related well-being. It's so intimately tied to where you live. And we know that it's more than medical care, and it's about connection, autonomy, purpose. And future research should explore how these relationships, this microcosm that exists in a nursing home, can promote meaningful roles in society for older adults that include choice in their daily support and a sense of belonging. And in terms of holistic health, we're thinking about going beyond the biomedical perspective to integrate emotional, physical, spiritual, and cultural needs, not only into care, but also into staff education. And that demands collaboration across disciplines to help us see and support residents as whole people. Again, time goes so quickly. We're talking about nursing homes as inclusive environments where they can be designed to promote participation for everyone and involve staff and residents in co-creating environments that support this idea of living well. And in terms of reducing inequalities, we want living well to be for all, not just for some. And research has to address the disparities that currently exist, particularly for those with cognitive decline. And we know that there's a huge gender imbalance for nursing home residents as well, with men not thriving as highly as women. And it relates as well to what Dolores and Maya have just spoken about taking an intersectional lens that is, first and foremost culturally sensitive to resident needs. And dying well. I'll say now, my supervisor says, Rebecca, don't talk about dying, it's not sexy. But I think we all have a vested interest in thinking about how we can live a life that is good and die a death that is good. And that means planning early. It means that it's an ongoing conversation from the time that you're admitted into a nursing home, and it's not just a checklist. First and foremost, it's asking people about their goals and values, and the simple question of what's important for you. Our research has developed a serious illness conversation guide, and it's a little bit misleading because it's not really a guide about serious illness conversations. It's a guide about how do you want to live as well as you can for as long as you can. And yeah, I know I'm at 5 minutes already, but I guess the take-home message from this slide is that dying well, we see it as a shared human process, and we want to explore ways through research that we can that we can help people, staff, communities stay engaged in this process, both before, during, and after death. And just lastly, the idea of our research is how to integrate these ideas to live and die well at the same time. And we need to move beyond this medical model of care in nursing homes to one that's more person-centered. And we know that that doesn't cost anything extra. Our research has shown that person-centered care in nursing homes doesn't cost anything more in terms of resources. And it's relatively easy to implement after staff have been educated. And so these are the things that will change policy and practice. We know that cost saving is a major driver for any kind of change. So if we can show that not only does it have a positive impact on people's lives and deaths, it also saves time, money, resources, as well as relieving stress of conscience and burden for staff. So yeah, we believe that these experiences, of living and dying should be both visible and valued in all areas of research, policy, and practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. That was great. Right, so moving on to our next panelist, we have Dr. Kate Pemble, who is a research fellow qualitative in dementia and aging at the University of Stirling. So whenever you're ready, Kate.
Fantastic. Can you see and hear me okay? Gorgeous.
Okay, so my name is Catherine Preble. I am at the University of Stirling, and I'll present to you today very quickly, and I do have a timer up, I promise, on my kind of what's for the future, what do we need to do, which, if anyone else asks, is whole, undiminished, messy, contradictory people, or its alternative title, which is it's time to be professional pedants and champions of genuinely bad chat. Researcher insight to myself, why I'm speaking on this: I am professionally bad chat. I am the downer at every party where aging comes up, and weirdly enough, that's a few of them. My background is social science and psychology. I graduated out of my undergraduate psychology degree into the recession. Don't recommend it. Did a couple of years in autism support, came back in to look at metacognition and autism before stepping over into social science and disability studies, where I did my thesis. That thesis looked at how people living with dementia organized and managed their relationships, their physical space, and their understanding of themselves through time. None of this helps me be good chat at parties, but the hill that I am willing to die on that makes me spectacularly bad chat at parties is that older people are whole, undiminished, often disabled, and I do mean that in the social model way, where it is imposed on top of physical health impairments, illnesses, etc. They experience impairment, they experience oppression, but they also have a right to have sex, take risks, make bad decisions, receive support even when they're making bad decisions, and participate as full members of society. Now, embracing the mess that is a whole person with a whole life experience behind them who has the right to make both good and bad decisions involves quite a bit. On the societal side, the structural side, it involves, as I think every speaker so far has already mentioned, addressing the stigmatization that comes along with age. It requires us to start really engaging with the idea that older people are marginalized and they are actively oppressed. It requires us to look at the lack of intergenerational, community-centered approaches. We are continually, for a number of structural reasons, looking at older people in their own little silo, and that does not help promote them or an awareness of them and their issues as society's issues, as our issues in the future. We tend to also view them as separate from proactive measures around political, ecological, social, cultural change. They are affected by this, but we very rarely look at how they affect this going forwards. We build models often that require us to be constantly in a state of defense because we leave ourselves open to bad actors and people acting in bad faith. I will come back to that. Spoiler alert. On the individual side, I think it's going to require us to really engage with the impact of lived history, not just that people have it, but that it actually does impact how they process, how they perceive, and how they understand not only their place in the world as they age in it, but how other people react to them. This idea of embodied selfhood, my experience of myself as I age within my physical flesh, the impact of my cultural and ethnic background, my experiences of poverty, which we're usually pretty good at being aware of, but also affluence in the way that our access to financial resources can change over time, particularly cost of living prices wise, of sex and sexuality, and of the impact of internalized ableism and disableism and ageism as people age and have to grapple with what they thought being older, having health conditions would look like. Now, I've got 1 more minute to start a fight, which I think is probably what we're doing about the future, and it's to say this. We need to, as a discipline, as a set of disciplines, stop building models that bad actors can take down. We need to be actively proactive and defensive when we make it. I'm going to punch up at Tom Kitwood here because punching up is a personal hobby. So when you put something out into the world that says, for example, personhood is a state that is bestowed by others, it's bestowed by one human being upon another in the context of that relationship, that makes it a choice. It is a thing that you choose to do. And therefore, if you do it, if you see someone, for example, living with dementia, as a whole person, you get to have a nice little gold star. Sorry, friends, that era is done. It's not working. It's not working. We're still dealing with massive amounts of stigmatization. It's time to go forward and be really, really bad chat. Accepting that people living with dementia or disabled people or queer people exist and that they have rights doesn't get you a gold star. It's not you doing a good thing. It's you doing the absolute bare minimum. When we start talking about things like dementia-friendly initiatives,
we're not giving out gold stars for that. It is you dealing with and working towards dealing with the oppressive practices in your area, in your sector, and that is good, and it is worthy of recognition and respect, but it's not gold star territory. We're going to go forward, we're going to be awkward, we're going to be bad chat, and I think it's going to be better for everyone when we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. That was great. I really enjoyed your animation. Right, our next panelist is Dr. Menching Joshi, who is an associate lecturer in the School of Geography and Sustainable Development at the University of St Andrews. So it's your turn for your 5 minutes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And can you hear me well? And see me well, and let me know if you don't. And thank you for having me today. And I see many of our panelists and keynote speakers very professional and scientific. And I don't have kind of reference in my slides. I just realized. I think my talk will be mainly reflect on my kind of frustration and my hope based on my lived experience of doing research on ethnic minority aging. So like my PhD work is focusing on ethnic minority aging, but with a particular focus on the social well-being. That means their loneliness, isolation, and social support experience. So we all know that these two kind of very significant demographic trends, which is population aging and international migrants, are driving the increasing ethnic and cultural diversity of our older populations in many high-income countries. And globally, there are like 85.4 million immigrants aged 50 and above. And then in the UK context, in England and Wales, 14% of people aged 50 and over belong to an ethnic minority group. And in Scotland, this percentage is lower at 4.5%. And also, as the middle-aged ethnic minority people grow older, the ethnic and cultural diversity of our aging population is expected to increase further. So I think it is really important to understand the needs and experience of this growing demographic if we want to build inclusive aging societies. So one challenge I want to highlight is the way ethnic minority older people are often homogenized and othered. So too often they are treated as a single and uniform group. They are seen as others with special needs and even problematized as a burden to our services and societies. But I think the reality is very different. They are part of the mainstream aging population, and their lives are very diverse, shaped by migration, culture, class, and inequalities. And like all other older people, they also have needs, and services should respond to everyone equally, and that includes cultural needs. And importantly, ethnic minority older people also contribute to our families, communities, and societies in vital ways through intergenerational support, the transfer of cultural knowledge, and by enriching the cultural diversity of our societies. So they offer us opportunities to build a more inclusive future. And another big issue is how aging challenges for ethnic minority older people are framed. So again, too often disadvantages are blamed on individuals and responsibilities are placed on them or sometimes on their communities. So to age well themselves, and policies and services then focus on fixing the person as though the problem lies with them. But my research shows that the reality is much more structural. So well-being is shaped by racism, inequality, and exclusion. And barriers in society limit opportunities no matter how hard individuals are trying. And systems themselves can create disadvantages and exclusions. For example, loneliness among ethnic minority older people is often described as a personal failing. So we blame them that they are not sociable enough and they are not integrating. But what I find is that racism and discrimination actively produce loneliness by undermining trust, belonging, and participation. So we think we need to move from individual blame to structural change and tackling the inequalities that drive these outcomes rather than asking people to manage them alone. So look to the future, the vision I want to say on ethnic aging is one where the diversity and the contributions of ethnic minority older people are fully recognized, and they are not an add-on, but they are integral to how we understand aging in our societies. And to achieve this, we need I call it a multi-dimensional view of aging that includes individual, relational, community, but also structural factors. Only by confronting inequalities and tackling systematic barriers can we create truly inclusive environments where all older people can thrive. So in short, if we want a just future of aging, we must stop othering minority older people and start recognizing them as the central to the story of aging in our society. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Menching.
Sharing. Yeah.
Very good, thank you. And our final panelist, we have Mr. Phil Taverner, who is Chair of Trustees for Carers in Bedfordshire. So whenever you're ready, Phil.
Thank you. I'm just having trouble sharing my screen. It won't do it. It worked in the rehearsal.
Sam, did you want to?
Can you?
Oh, no, it's okay. I think it's loading.
Did you break the system, Phil? Should I attempt to do it at my end?
I think it might be.
Okay, one sec. Right. This is why you have backup plans. Can that be seen?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's your first one. All right, Phil?
I think he might have crashed, as Kate has said.
Okay. Should we perhaps take a few questions while Phil comes back?
Yeah, sounds like a good idea.
This wasn't one of the possible sections that we anticipated happening in our risk planning. But yeah, I think should we maybe pose a couple of questions to Dolores to get things going? I mean, Dolores, I was really intrigued by your presentation. Thanks so much. It's brilliant. So many thoughts firing off. But I was interested in the notion of power, and maybe, how do we as researchers become comfortable with the idea of kind of giving power away to maybe our participants or our other stakeholders in the process? Did you have any thoughts on that?
Thank you for your question, Sam. I have thoughts. I don't have answer. No, but I think it's a big challenge. I think the level of frustration that we can feel when we are not controlling many things in the research is something. And overall, when you are a beginner, we can say in research. So I think it's important to do the exercise of reflexibility about, okay, the focus of the research is the objective of the research, objective that are constructed within participant, And if this is the center, I think it's easier to manage the rest that is not controlling. So for instance, but there are some tips also. I remember when I did my first Be Alone interview and was the participant who proposed where we go. And I mean, I'm in another country, was in another city. I mean, it was like, how can I do? I usually organize the office with all controlling the register, everything. So there are some tips that you can go check the place, be familiar with. So there are some march. I don't know if that say like this. Like there are some things that you can do, no to control, but yes to feel more secure with the situation. But related, for instance, with the adaptation of the research in the process, change objective, change method, change the calendar. That is something that we should manage like a researcher. And I repeat, if the focus is the objective and is the participant, this is the focus of the research. I don't know if this answer or give more question.
I guess all of the best answers are also a question in themselves, right? But no, that's really interesting. Does anyone else on the panel have any thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and come in that, and then I think Maya's probably behind me as well. Just to say that everything that you've just heard is 100% correct. There are a lot of issues internally in terms of, I think, what happens when we as researchers give up our hard-won, much suffered for space as expert in the space, right? Because we've got the PhD now, and that makes it's a lot of tension there. There's institutional tension too, there's systematic tension too. It's very difficult to push through a genuinely co-produced project, for example, to get either ethical clearance for it or to get funding for it, because if you are genuinely co-producing with older people, you can't necessarily say as clearly what is this going to look like in the end, what's this outcome going to be, which usually means that in practice we can be genuinely into co-production and sharing of power. But in reality, as with most things, there are limits on that. So it's a question of how we genuinely work within those limits as much as we can and manage everybody's feelings involved when we do so. But I will clear the stage because I think Myra's coming in as well.
Just sort of piggybacking onto what Kate and Dolores mentioned earlier, I think there's a lot of, I guess, discomfort in relinquishing our power as a researcher to someone else, because I'm thinking a lot on the lines of if we have co-researchers who are community researchers, that could be a good way to get into the community. But on the other hand, you do lose quite a little bit of, I guess, ability to control that. I think a lot of researchers are so uncomfortable with that. I mean, I am also guilty of that to some extent, because I feel like sometimes I do need to have a bit of direction that answers a little bit of what I want to answer, and they might just go off the tangent a little bit. So I don't know if there's any particular way to frame it, but I feel like a good balance maybe, but how that looks like, that's a big question mark. So I'm gonna end there.
Yeah, can I jump in? Yeah, I'm kind of thinking the question about the power imbalance maybe within the community, because from the academic community, I always heard we discuss about the power difference, for example, between academics and our participants, or between academics, participants, and policymakers. So I don't have an answer, but I always think, like, for example, the co-researchers who are working with us might already been at kind of better status compared with their peers within their communities. So I always have the question that how do we include our older people, in my case, older ethnic minority people, who are kind of more disadvantaged within their own community. For example, like the co-researchers who can participate in my research might have to have kind of at least English proficiency, which is not necessarily high for our ethnic minority peoples. And that is a huge barrier. And I frame that as it's my problem. I don't have the language proficiency to include them. It's not their problem. They don't have English skills to participate in my research. So, I mean, I'm actively seeking answers for this question, but yeah, so yeah, just some thought based on my reflections.
Well, just in the nick of time, I think Phil has rejoined us. Are you there, Phil?
I'm here. Yes, sorry about that. Teams
No
just
problem.
completely threw me out. I've had to go and get out and get back in via the ordinary kind of internet, and I've lost my presentation and everything. So bear with me a minute.
Such are the joys of modern technology, eh?
Yeah, we should do these things in person, you know.
I'll tell you what, Phil, just to avoid the risk that it happens again, why don't I share the slides for you, and then you can just do the speaking, because we know that's working. Is that all right with you?
Yeah, I'm just getting the presentation up now, so I'll see if I can share it again. Dum-de-dum-de-dum. Can you see that?
Yes, we can. Well, I can.
It's working now.
Yeah. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, let's go show from the beginning, and then we'll go for it. Right. Sorry about all that. This isn't just because I'm the only old person here. I promise that. So I can tell you from personal experience that getting old is a bugger. A fellow trustee who died recently once remarked to me that growing old is not for wimps. But as Oscar Wilde might have said, the only thing worse than growing old is not growing old. I'm not sure he did actually say that, but he did say two other things that might help us understand aging a bit more empathetically. The first is that the true tragedy of aging isn't that we grow old, it's that our souls stay young. I don't feel like I'm in my 70s, so it's hard when I look at myself in the mirror or another bit of me stops working. He also said that with age comes wisdom, but sometimes age comes alone. And I personally find that the Buddha's 5 remembrances help me to understand and help me to invite wisdom along on the ride and accept that this is a natural way of things. Even though I can do things to make it a lot easier, this is the way things are. Another translation of the 5th remembrance adds the thought that my actions are my continuation, which reminds us that what we do and say, what we say and do still matters, and that every day that we live in our 80s has the same intrinsic value as the day we lived in our 20s. I'm here in my capacity as Chair of Carers in Bedfordshire, and my task is to draw attention to the millions of people whose daily actions involve the care of family, friends and neighbours. Their actions most certainly matter, not just for the people for whom they care, but for everybody else in society as well. What they do, the country would have to find the cost of another whole NHS just to keep the millions of people for whom they're caring at their current level of health and well-being. We currently carried out our biannual survey of carers' experiences in Bedfordshire, and I want to draw attention to a few headlines from the 700 or so people who responded. At the end of the survey, we asked people what they would change, and here are some of the headlines. For many carers, their caring role is a threat to their financial welfare. 41% said that their financial situation has got worse over the last year. Many people have to either go part-time or even stop working altogether to fulfill their caring responsibilities. Many carers want support in accessing flexible or part-time employment, recognizing their need to balance caring and earning. And they also frequently raised the need for better financial recognition, including an improved or exempted carers allowance. And what they asked for most was access to respite and breaks. 77% of people said that they never get the chance for an overnight break, but 40% don't even get the time to take a couple of hours for themselves to get their hair done or to meet friends for coffee, etc. Responses also reflected frustration about accessing timely help, especially in times of crisis or changing needs. Carers expressed a need for an easier navigation of services and for better communication between health and care providers. These last 2 points reinforce our challenge to develop the kinds of relationships with statutory organisations that allow us to address systemic issues together rather than as adversaries or in a subservient purchase-provider relationship. As a matter of carers' health, 53% of carers said that their own physical health had got worse over the last year, and 50% said their own mental health had got worse. 30% have a disability themselves and so need their own care. We've had some success in Bedfordshire in persuading primary care providers to register carers in line with the NICE guideline, but there's a long way to go. Even when they are registered, the emphasis tends to remain on the primary patient and rarely turns to the carer's own health needs. People talk about advocacy. Carers are really desperate for someone to help them have an effective voice. They don't feel that anyone is listening or even noticing them. And some focused on the need for society and professionals to value carers' role more. In the NICE guideline on support for adult carers, we recommended the principle of parity of esteem as a starting point here. And then finally, access to respite kind of support groups, and a number of groups highlighted isolation. They actually requested more groups, more community spaces or peer support. They're not asking for the world. They just kind of want an opportunity to meet people in a similar situation. Interestingly, in an age where policymakers are jumping on AI, partly as a way of saving money, nobody, not a single one of the 700 people who replied, asked for more online support. People still want the personal. There's no doubt that AI holds enormous potential, but we mustn't forget that what makes us human is our connections with each other. As with everything else, technology should be driven by the needs and wishes of those it seeks to help, not drive them into a barren robotic cul-de-sac. And finally, I'd just like to give the last word to a guy called Mark, who writes a very entertaining and thought-provoking blog, which is worth following if you get the chance. It can be found on our website. I'll stop there, probably have my 5 minutes.
Thank you, Phil. So, Amy, are you going to kind of take us through some Q&A now? And I can support by monitoring the chat. If anyone wants to put any questions in the chat, I can sort of feed those to you if that's helpful.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so if there... Oh, you've got a question, so maybe we'll start with that one. Did you want to go ahead and read that, or shall I?
I can do that. So unless, Junji, unless you're there and you wanted to read that yourself. Had a bit of
yeah, I'm fine.
Question.
Yeah, thanks, Sam and Amy. Thanks, first of all, thanks to all the speakers for all your wonderful presentation and talks. That's really inspiring and wonderful to hear. And I also saw lots of kind of common consensus and some of, even though we focus on different area, but I feel there was lots of common kind of collective agreement throughout your presentation, which is wonderful. So I just basically want to ask a little bit for all the panel speakers about your thoughts and observations of the change of gerontological research and practice during the past probably decades or several years, and what are the focuses you see the change, what are the priorities you see the change, and what do you think is the trend for the next kind of decades or the next few years? If that's questions too big, then yeah, just share your thoughts from your own kind of perspective. That would be grateful. Thank you.
Who wants to crack at that first then? Go on, Kate.
Yeah, I'll icebreak on this one. I think we're seeing a lot of the things that we're all advocating for. We are seeing some motion in that direction. Certainly in the rooms where we all like to be, in spaces like this where we are all very aligned in what our values are and what we're hoping to do and emancipatory research and that kind of stuff. I think thing that's striking for me is when I'm not in these rooms, when I'm with folks from other disciplines or other backgrounds, or people who are not engaged with research at all, where they are maybe a little bit behind. I think the work of the next 5, 10, 30, 50 years, whatever, is going to be going out there and spreading the work that we're doing, but acknowledging that we're not going to be singing to the choir out there. And that's going to mean a little bit more clarity around how we articulate our message. It's going to mean acknowledging that we're going to get into arguments. We're not always going to be palatable. We're not always going to be something that people want to hear. But I think several of us have talked actively about oppression today, and people do not like to know that they have a role in oppression. They don't want to be faced with, whether you meant it or not, the things that you are doing with the best of intentions can cause harm. That is a very difficult thing for people to take on board. So I think the direction within these spaces is 100% the right direction. How we translate that outside of these rooms, I think that's going to be the key question.
Okay, so we've got two answers, I think. So, Dolores, do you want to go for it first?
Yes, I only want to point something that if I think in terms of what happened 10 years ago and what should happen in the future. Well, 7 years ago, I was doing a data collection with participants in Spain, and I was listening to people saying, yeah, I'm participating in this, but I don't see change in my life. I don't see that this have an impact in my life, in policies. And I'm doing data collection right now in 2025 in Quebec, and I'm listening to the same. So participants say, I don't want to collaborate anymore because I don't feel that this have an impact in the life of other adults. So I think this is a challenge that we come with this from a long time ago, and we are not given an answer, no yet. I know that we have a lot of call for funding that now give a lot of value to the knowledge mobilization. So I think that is a super good point that we should promote in the future. Is all related to how we are doing, what we are doing with the result of the research, and how this impact in life of people in a realistic way.
Thank you, Dolores. Maya?
Just to piggyback on that a little bit too, I mean, I can only speak to this area that I'm working on right now, which is mainly focused on like trans aging and LGBT aging generally. We're looking a bit more, I guess, kind of getting out of this sort of biomedicalized space. So I think that is super helpful because in some of the work that with the research that I'm doing right now with the participants that I work with, they spoke about how they're a little bit exhausted. There's a bit of like medical fatigue to research really, because I think focus on gerontology traditionally has always been so biomedicalized. So like while we are in this space right here, I think that's a good way to move forward. And I think it's moving forward, but maybe not as fast as I'd like it to be potentially. Yeah.
Menching?
Yes, I would like to share like my observation, perhaps from the research method perspective. I think definitely as our keynote speakers and many other panel discussants shared about the creative and participatory approach, and how do we really genuinely include our older people. And I feel that this approach become a like very fancy approach. Every research want to use it, like funding bodies like it. It is creative. It is fine for communities. So I'm just not worried, but a little bit concerned about how do we do participatory approach with older people, with care, with responsibility, especially maybe as a like early career researchers who is also interested in this method, who would like to have more guidance or more experience from the researchers who have more experience on this. So we think we need one platform, something like that, to share experience as a community, so the new researchers who is going to use this method can be responsible and use it with care instead of just use it as a new types of exploitation tool to exploit our community. And the other observation about methods, I think, is the potential of using mixed methods, both kind of combine like large scale quantitative methods and qualitative research, which captures the lived experience of our older people. But also, I think there is an opportunity to bring qualitative findings or qualitative data together, which I don't say that much as for quant data, because I based on my experience, for example, I do research interviews with Chinese older people. So, but it's only limited to 10, 20 people in my local area. Then I have some friends or networks who do interviews with other Chinese people in the other part of the UK or even other high-income countries. So, and as qualitative kind of fun research, sometimes we are criticized that we have a kind of smaller sample size, which we argue that our aim is to capture the richness of the lived experience. So I wonder if we can have some mechanism to bring the qualitative data, which we have already collected, and to make it more powerful instead of in an isolated way, which is similar as quant data set, which people are already doing. But definitely there are a lot of things to consider, like ethical issues, confidentiality, but I just have some thought on that. Yeah.
Thank you, Menching. And Phil, I think you wanted to share your answer to that.
Yeah, thank you. So I think I'm the only non-academic here, so you've probably heard this before, but my plea would be that whatever the future research is, that at least some of it answers the questions that people want answered. So I guess I'm arguing for a lot of applied research but as well as kind of the blue sky kind of open thinking research, because we need you guys to kind of tell us some answers to help us face the challenges in front of us.
Thank you, Phil. So you've got a question in the chat from Jennifer, and I'd just like to direct that to Rebecca, if you wouldn't mind. Do you have any specific tools or tech services that exist for connecting elders?
Good questions. My research, as I said, is mainly focused on nursing home care, and there are certainly some resources that connect relatives, so carers, caregivers of residents, and I know of one specific app that's been developed based on both qualitative and quantitative research, like you were saying, Phil, like some practical application of the of this airy fairy sky research that we do, and caregivers have created a support network amongst essentially themselves and their wider networks, where they can ask for help with the things that they need help with, which has been it's such a small thing, but it's really I mean, we're more connected than ever and yet less connected than ever. So if we can give people these tools, then it goes some way towards, I guess, improving overall the well-being, of both, I would say, residents and their carers. But it's not exactly my area, but I definitely know that tools exist.
Great, thank you. Verena, you've got your hand up.
Hi, just to say, starting, thank you very much for really brilliant presentations. They've been fantastic. I just wanted to, it's not a question, but just to give a little bit of a response to the points Phil was making and other presenters about engaging with older people. And we found that our most successful research projects have been where, before we've actually started bidding for funding, we've gone out and talked to older people. We've started with civil organisations, and then through them we've got champions to discuss the issues and for them to shape what it is they want answering, so that it's not research ever being done unto them, but it's saying to communities, what is it you want answered, which is really what Phil's saying as well. You need to go out to those communities, start there, then build your project around what it is people want answered, and then bid for funding. I think, and then you get all the right methodologies and things, because you've explored all of that before you started putting it together and trying to go to the research councils. And we've been doing this since way before, through CABS, that it was expected from research councils that we had participation and etc. So I think that's a good model for you to take forward, and I hope that helps.
Thank you. I think, Phil, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so I don't want to monopolise things, but just to kind of follow up from what Verena said, older people are just, most of the guys I can see on my screen in 30, 40 years' time. People have talked about the skills kind of repository there is within the older generation. There will be people who have had whole careers in academia and research and so on, and they who can kind of really contribute as co-researchers for this stuff. It's not just again about being done to. There's a pool of expertise you're missing if you don't kind of include people right from the beginning.
Dolores?
Yes, thank you for your comment, Verena. And I want to share related to that something that was a personal experience. I was doing my research about baby boomer generation and social participation during a long time, my PhD, everything, and my postdoc. But in one discussion group that I did in Quebec, all the question of diversity, sexual diversity and sexuality appear. And we have two organizations, no lucrative, I don't know how to say, OML, that participate in, and they start to speak about this reality. And me, I was completely, was a subject that I was not familiar with that. And was in this discussion group that we said, okay, we decide to sit with this organization to speak about that before that we organize any funding call or whatever. And we were working with this organization during 6 months, between 6-8 months, and we try to think about what is something meaningful to do research about this. And that, I confess, is the first time in my life, in my career, that I can do that and take time to do that. So also having I don't know how to say, a position at the university or the research and give this opportunity to work in that way. It's not that the early career researcher doesn't want to do like this. It's more that what are our reality and our limitation and that. And I want to take advantage to say something to mention about the methodology, and something that helped a lot to us is we took time when we used photo voice and be alone interview for the first time. We took time and we include in the project do an evaluation on how the participant feel during this using this kind of method. That helped a lot to understand what is working, what is not working, how to improve the use of this method, and also to work to the humidity. I don't know if say humidity when I don't know. Sorry if it is not humidity. Maybe is. I will check and I will say the good word. But this like when you receive this feedback for the participant is like you can do a better evaluation and improve the way that you present and you try to do your data collection. So I know this time that we don't have because we need to publish in theory, but this is necessary and is very useful.
Is it all right if I just make a bit of a connection, Amy? So I think Jennifer, you've got a question in the chat around sort of how to connect external individuals with passionate researchers, and I don't know the kind of practical answer to that question, but I think there's a really interesting idea in there which has a synergy with a lot of the other points that are being made around power and these sort of traditional structures or boundaries that we are sort of are accustomed to in research that seem to be dissolving a bit, right? And I think to Verina's point, sort of looking around and looking at the kind of at the world as a series of resources that can be drawn on in different ways, and possibly one resource offers multiple things, and sort of dissolving these boundaries, I think is an interesting thought for the future of this discipline, perhaps. Jennifer, that probably doesn't help to answer your question at all. Verena, have you got your hand up, or is that a legacy hand?
Legacy hand. I did ask it to lower, but has it not
Okay.
lowered?
It has now. Sorry, Amy, I talked over you there.
No, that's all right. I just had maybe one question that I think would probably be quite good for anyone on the panel really to answer, and that is, how do we respond to the accelerating academic demands without losing the importance of rigor, inclusivity, and adaptability in our research procedures? Go on, Kate.
Tag me in, boss. I'm going to be radical here. We got to help each other out. We got to help each other out. The way that the institutional setup, the way that the capitalistic setup, the way that the cost of living crisis and lack of funding pushes us, as it pushes us to work increasingly in isolation to protect our resources, to protect our time, to protect our contacts from each other in a way that is totally understandable, because we're living in a time of such scarcity. We simply cannot produce the high quality research if we continue to do that. The only way we're going to survive and do good research is if we are reaching out to each other, if we're acting in good faith, if we are sharing what we have and being as helpful as possible. Now, that doesn't mean always opening your address book to anyone who asks. It does mean that you still have a responsibility to those communities that you've built up a rapport with. But we really do have to, I think, move towards quite a radical space where we genuinely believe that if we act together, we have power, that there's a value in working with each other. Speaking as like a perpetually insecure ECR, it's tempting to view the other people who go for a job position as your competition. They're not. At this point, if somebody got Maya and me in the same room and they picked one of us over the other, it's not that one of us is better. We're at this point two fundamentally different researchers. We're not competition, friends, and the only way we're going to do that kind of robust work is through radical collaboration, whether the powers that be want us to or not.
Amy, if I may, I think that is a really lovely and positive idea to end on, probably, because it's now 1 minute to when we need to close anyway. So, Rebecca, I'm sorry, but maybe if you put your question or comment in the chat, we can try and cover it either now quickly or afterwards. And this isn't the end of this discussion, by the way, by any means. But I just want to take a couple of minutes to try to bring this to a close and to sort of to thank some people. So I'd like to extend thanks to Dolores Valpuesta, our keynote speaker, and to all of our panelists, Maya, Rebecca, Kate, Menjing, and Phil. Thank you so much. It's been fascinating. And thank you to you, the audience, for your questions and contributions and interest. And just to say, we're really grateful to the Open University, to the British Society of Gerontology, and to everyone behind the scenes for making this event possible. Thank you. Yeah, and just to ask, please, to continue engaging with CABS and ERA as we look ahead to the next 30 years of aging research policy and practice. And as mentioned, we do hope to produce some kind of written output soon. And Yeah, and also the forthcoming ERA conference, the rebranded ERA conference that Amy mentioned. Like, look out for that. When is that exactly, Amy, again, actually?
So usually it's the 2 days before the actual BSG conference. So I would imagine it would be the 22nd and the 23rd of June, with the BSG conference starting on the 24th, and that'll be at Oxford Brookes.
Oxford Brookes, thank you. And Verena and Manik, I know you're both in the room, as it were. I wondered if, given this is the third of 3 sessions for this 30th anniversary conference, whether there are any kind of final overarching reflections that you had about the 3 days at all.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Sam. Verena, shall I go first? And is that okay? Verena's got her hand up.
Yeah, no, that's fine, Manik.
Yeah, so very quickly, a very big thank you to all the speakers today. A very thought-provoking session again, and to Amy and Sam as well, and also to all our excellent speakers that we've had over sessions 1 and 2. And I just want to maybe pick up 2 points, and I'm sure Verena has another point to bring up across the 3 sessions. I thought ageism came up as an enduring theme, and just makes me wonder whether we should be trying to be more aware of it and whether we can reduce it, because as contexts change, societies change, expectations change, there are newer and newer ways that it can emerge. So can we recognize it as it comes and do something about it? So that was one enduring theme across the thing. The other thing I especially liked how Phil brought up that quote, Phil, about conflating old age and wisdom. And that was also a running theme, which came through on the first day with, aging as continually living. Then the WHO theme of aging as living and old age as a part of it. So, aging and old age and older people. So there needs to be a bit more thinking around all of this, why only old age? And one more thing I noticed was I was just pondering on is that interdisciplinarity is no longer perhaps a luxury. And you are increasingly have to work. And I think Kate mentioned, how do we inform other disciplines? And I think that's one way where you actually work with them. That came up yesterday as well. And I think our founder member, Sheila Pease, talked about the power of collectives in her inaugural session. And if you could look at her slides, I thought what it took away was that platforms like this, and somebody in the chat was asking about how do I engage, go and join your local voluntary Age UK, BSG, UK AgeNet, or wherever you are, and engage with it more widely, because the power to discuss, to rebut, to debate ideas is always the way forward. So I'll let Verena come in now. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Manik. I think building on that, I think the biggest points that I've seen is that things that the founders of CABS were debating 30 years ago, some of them haven't gone away and maybe have become more exacerbated, like ageism, like loneliness. They're things we're aware of, but we're not really being able to make a lot of difference. And CABS is one of the members of UK AgeNet, and our last meeting, we voted to try and campaign towards a Minister of Ageing here in the UK. And I think what today's emphasised is that there's really, really excellent research going on, and there's really great ideas of how to move forward. But I think I'm very influenced by Kate saying we've got to bring it out more into the open, these uncomfortable conversations, because there's good practice going on. There's been good research showing things that need to be changed, but we're only making little inroads into making the change. And maybe as researchers, what we should be doing is actually becoming a bit more vocal in the outside world. Not, I think we're very good at talking to each other, but maybe we've actually got to take a slightly more activist approach, a bit like Care UK, who have always been more of an activist and saying, these are the things that older people are not not getting addressed. So I think that's my take-home message. We've actually got to be more willing to inform the wider public than perhaps we are at the moment. And my final thing is that Sam has mentioned the publication. It's open to anybody to contribute, not just the presenters from the 3 days. If you have any reflections, thoughts, challenges, things you think that as gerontologists we should be considering, please send a note either to Manik or myself, or to we'll put the our CAB's address, email address as well. We'll send that out to you. But any thoughts, anything you think you'd like to put into this, we would be really welcome, because we want to have this as an all-inclusive booklet, not just limited to those of us who've been privileged to speak over the last 3 days. So thank you, Sam, and thank you all. It's been a brilliant, absolutely brilliant 3 days. I don't think we could have had a better celebration of the state of research today. And also thank you for those of you who have been projecting into the future in the session today. Thank you.
Can I just come in with one little thing, Sam, if that's okay? You're not.
Of course, yeah, no, of course.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up, and I just forgot to, one I posted in the chat box about the Avril Osborne Fund, because we have talked a lot today about inclusive research, participatory research, transformational research on all accounts. And I just wanted to add that as I think about what next for gerontology, I'm very sure that you are going to have to work, or we are going to have to work in only participatory ways going forward. The funding agencies are also changing over time, and so much so that we are now having community-led research calls. So it is not just about, as you said, what is genuine, but it is also very much about having the right skills, soft skills, relational skills to work with not only an interdisciplinary researcher, but across the board with various stakeholders and agencies. So I just wanted to leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks, Manik. And I think, what better way to end than to just note again that this has been a coming together of 2 different groups, the delivery of this session. And so thanks again to CABS and to ERA for that. And we hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll be in touch. Thanks so much, everyone.